Okay, hello and welcome everybody. Let me just check that we are really online because it's a bit confusing with this new setup. Let me just wait for it to load, just a second. Okay, sounds good. It looks like I'm live on YouTube. So today's provocative title, The Importance of Having a Dick, is I think one of my most important broadcasts and perhaps one of the more controversial, although it's actually not that controversial at all. It's really, rather obvious, but nevertheless, I feel I have to make a couple of points today. Now, the background to all this, which you also have to understand, is the following. I'm going into court next week, okay, or the week after, depending on, how I get my act together. And I'm going to file my court case desperately trying to stop my mutilation torture and that of my witnesses, my family members, my colleagues, and, many other people around the world. Now, you have to be aware that I'm going to court alone, okay? This is not a class action. I also went alone up against British intelligence in my litigation in 2016. There I was completely alone. The world didn't know about it. My parents really didn't keep a tab. My husband had no idea what I was really doing because he couldn't care less. And now the situation is slightly different. I'm still going into court alone, but the world knows, okay? So there are thousands on thousands of people who know. So already the situation is different. Now, the other thing that's different is that back when I litigated in 2016, I had literally no idea about these directed energy weapons, literally none, okay? I had a vague, sketchy idea that they exist, but I didn't really know about neurotechnology. I knew it exists, but I didn't know how it works. I for sure didn't know that I was implanted head to toe and all these things, okay? So now I'm in a completely different situation. Nevertheless, keep in mind, I'm going to court alone, okay? I'm going to court as a woman, completely on my own, without any support. I've got some witnesses queued up, and I've got some expert witnesses who can support perhaps, and so on. But still, the person litigating is just me, myself, and I, okay? Now, one of the things I learned litigating last time in 2016 was that MI6 was rather cocky, okay? They couldn't give a shit. And I don't think they would have acted quite the same way if I'd been a man. In other words, remember that with MI6 and all these intelligence agencies, we are dealing with groomed and selected sex perverts and psychopaths, okay? But sexual perversion is one of the main recruitment avenues and qualifying features of these people who work there, okay, because they have to run child abuse and child trafficking and human ritual sacrifice, especially child sacrifice for the control files and so on. So a certain amount of sexual and mental degeneracy is a pre-requirement to work at MI6, right? Otherwise, you'll be just whatever, the receptionist, the cleaning lady. So these are the sort of people I'm dealing with. And because of the sexual perversion, the sexual aggression against women is just astounding, okay? Now, this is a fact from war. Okay, any type of war that has ever happened on the planet, typically the classical telltale sign for war crimes or war crimes happening in a region, which is recognized by all the human rights lawyers around the world, is the extremely high number of female and child victims. So women and children are slaughtered and raped and mutilated in extremely large numbers, okay? That has, again, an evolutionary background because an invading army traditionally, in their mindset, right, and as they are evolutionary primed, would first of all rape all the women of the other side to impregnate them, to basically assert their genetic dominance. And they would murder all the children because they would be the children of the other side, right? So it's at the end of the day, it's always a war between men, but women and children are the victims. This is how it has been for millennia, ever since wars existed. And there's no difference now. So keep in mind that even though it's true, right, that both men and women are raped in this program, and I know that, and I support both male and female victims equally, it still is a fact that I'm going into court as a woman, and MI6 immediately, like their dick twitches and their pounce, right? They pounce like, I don't know, leching tigers, because as soon as they see a woman, all they see is a rape material, okay? Now that was pretty clear last time, okay? With all the jeering and laughing, and generally, even though there was high court litigation running, they didn't take me seriously as a litigant, okay? And it's very much like the kind of macho, cocky, it's just a little woman sort of approach, but it's very real, okay? And when you're dealing with psychotic degenerates and sex offenders, this is just even heightened, okay? It's not reduced, it's heightened. Now, heightened from what? Heightened from the everyday experience of every single woman on this planet, right? Which is that as a woman, you will be sexually molested. There will be, with a very high likelihood, which last time I checked my family and friends was 25%, there will be an attempted rape and there will be rape, okay? In your life, as you go through life, okay? So if you think, oh, no one's ever tried to rape me, or nobody raped me, well, good for you. You know, 3/4 of the population will be like you, but every fourth person, or rather every fourth woman, will have suffered attempted rape, myself included, okay? I think I mentioned this already online before, so I'm not, you know, this is not breaking news. But when I was at the time a PhD student, but I was a tutor. I was already teaching particle physics and nuclear physics at Oxford, and another tutor tried to rape me. Okay, so at the time I escaped just by my own wit, and it's a longer story how I did that. But man, right, it was really in the nick of time, and this guy was really ready to just, you know, beat me into the ground to get his will, right? Now that was an Oxford tutor, okay? It was not from my subject, I should say. My colleagues in physics are lovely. That's my experience. Usually physics and maths is harmless and generally just lovely, okay? But other subjects are not. So, you know, that was my experience. Now, as I started talking about this, when it came to the implanting, and as you know, I'm implanted in my genitals and my rectum, and my uterus is even implanted, right? And I suffer daily rape, actually multiple times daily. So as I started talking to women, I discovered, first of all, that as far as this program is concerned, both men and women are raped equally, okay? But then when it's about normal life, women are raped or almost raped, right, at a much higher number, okay? So it is, I think what's happening is that this program is maximizing profits from sex trafficking, right? So it's really pushing up, you know, also the rape of men to the absolute max. But in normal life, the experience of women is that, you know, men will try to subjugate you in the most violent and sexually violent way. Okay, and you're either lucky and you have never met a man like that, or you're lucky because you can actually outsmart him like I did, or you're really not lucky and you either don't have the strength or you just can't escape, right? And then you'll be raped. Now, when I talk to men, this is unheard of, right? I think I would have to go to probably the gay community to find maybe the same, you know, number of actual rapes having taken place in a person's lifetime. Okay, so the life experience of men and women is absolutely not the same. And anybody trying to suggest the opposite doesn't know the statistical facts and doesn't know the basic facts of life. Okay, so it is for this reason, and I have to say that attempted rape and rape is just the most extreme end of a very broad spectrum where you will be, you know, kind of patronized at the more harmless end. You'll be smiled at, your actual educations and your work will not be recognized, right? Men will try to impose themselves on you, use the fact that they are your boss to get sexual favors and so on, which also happened to me. I had a boss, like an actual real boss, for 6 weeks 6 weeks, the rest of the time I either worked in science on my own projects, so I was self-employed. And during these 6 weeks, this guy already tried to get his cock out, right? No joke, real true story. So, you know, that is just how it is. So for this reason, there still is to this day, a huge amount of sexual violence and denigration and subjugation of women that happens every day, all around the world, in all institutions, all the way to Oxford and elite this and that. It just happens, okay? Now, when I say that, I'm not implying anything about specific men. I'm not even implying anything about men, you know, as in general over normal men. But it is just the fact that men are much more prone to rape, okay, to subjugate others, and women, as a result, as a collective, will have a rather shit time compared to the average male, okay? Now, everything that triggers this sort of subjugation and sexual molestation of women is, again, right, just a more extreme end of the spectrum of something that already exists in men by genetic definition, okay, and is part of their nature, which is that they do not consider women to be the same creatures as men, for obvious reasons. And nothing that we'll ever do in our society will get rid of that anytime soon, okay? So this means if a man meets a woman, and now I assume a heterosexual man, okay, which as last time I, you know, checked this, that still is the majority, though that might change if the CIA has its way, right? But when a man meets another man, he will approach that man completely differently than if he meets a woman. A heterosexual man will always think, oh, could I shag that thing? Literally. And with your woman, you know this because when a guy meets a guy, he will just look at this guy in the eyes. If he meets a woman, he will check her out, right? And as a woman, we've all met men who were having conversations with our boobs as opposed to with us, right? You ladies, you know exactly what I mean. So men don't have this. You, as a man, you don't go to somebody, you know, at work or with a serious problem or serious project, and this guy doesn't talk in your face, but talks to your dick. If it happened, you would notice and you'd be like, whoa, what just happened here, right? Someone's got a problem. But for the vast majority of women, that is just the everyday occurrence, okay? Literally every day. And it doesn't matter how high your qualifications are, right? I have now all the reasonably, you know, attainable qualifications. I've got my, you know, I came top of my year in my A levels. I've got a first-class master's from Oxford. I've got a PhD in a hard science, particle physics, for crying out loud. I had an elite fellowship at, you know, at Oxford. And now I'm one of the few people who's actually a court expert about Secret Service criminality. And I'm the only person to have ever taken on British intelligence, the whole, you know, triumvirate of them by myself in the High Court, right? So as far as qualifications go, I think I got a lot of t-shirts. Nevertheless, if I talk to any police officer who, as far as I can make out, they have degrees in picking their nose and swiveling in a chair, this guy will typically be an arrogant fuck, and he will look at me like I'm just some ditzy who walked off in, you know, off the street. And you really have to kick these guys in the bollocks repeatedly after you have beaten them into the ground before they pay you any sort of respect. And I mean the basics 0-point respect that every man gets when he walks through the door. Okay? I have experienced that in Germany. I have most certainly experienced that in the UK, and I've experienced that here in Switzerland. Okay? As a woman, especially to macho police officers who are inexplicably self-confident, women count for jack shit. So if you are a female victim, it doesn't matter what your qualifications are, you will be taken for trash. And it's just how it is. Okay, any woman who got anywhere with these dumb as fuck police officers, please raise your hand and tell me how you did it, because I haven't heard of any cases like that. Okay, I have heard of cases where men got somewhere with these police officers eventually, beating them into submission with time, right? But I haven't really heard of any women achieve that, okay? So there's this huge difference in our society that will just stay in our society forever and ever, as long as we're alive. And we either accept it and factor it into our war plans, or else we're fucked, okay? So if there are any, and now I'm talking about the war plans of the good side of how to fight this criminality. So if you're fighting this war and you assume that women will just solve all these problems for you and you don't have to do anything as a man, right? And by the way, I'm not talking about the men who are working their ass off and have taken huge personal costs doing so. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about all those feckless jerks who can't get off their asses. Okay, so if you are one of these hardworking men who has suffered incredibly, lean back. I'm not talking about you. Take some popcorn and just enjoy watching me, you know, ripping into all the other guys. Okay, so you step aside. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the average experience and this huge block of guys who could help us, but do not because they don't get up off their asses. Okay, so if you as society, as my audience, think that just by me going into court, I will change the world, I have to tell you that I'm only a woman, okay? So the only way I could get any respect from MI6 is probably if I had just killed a bunch of them and would walk into the court with a loaded, fully automatic machine gun. I think then I would have some, you know, minimum of respect. Otherwise, these people just think, look at this fluffy little thing. And they will take me and my entire court case as kind of like fun dick titillation. And I know because that's what they did last time. Okay. So now the question is, right, given that we have now, you know, we've now cottoned on to the overwhelming importance of having a dick, we have to figure out how we're going to make up for the fact that I don't have one. And I'm not going to get one, certainly not by the time of this court case. Okay, so somehow something needs to happen that room, you know, of my court case, the audience has to be populated with a lot of phalluses. Otherwise, MI6 just not going to give a shit. Okay. And I'm telling you, ladies, you have to come to my court case, but psychologically, for the judge, and especially for MI6, you will not have the same weight as men. You just won't, right? If my room, for example, will just me and completely filled with just men, right? Sitting there in black suits, right? Assuming they're all, you know, on my side as opposed to MI6, because that's what MI6 does, for obviously exactly the same reasons. You know, the impression on the lawyers and, you know, MI6 secretly interfacing with the room and actually communicating with the lawyers, right? Because they're not going to fly solo. They will be like, you know, completely cased in. The impression will be completely different as opposed to me going into the room and the entire room or the audience behind me is just filled with 100% women. Now, in your mind, imagine you walk into a room and the entire room is filled with men, right? You would probably think, oh, I just walked into, I don't know what, like, you know, a war room meeting, a tech company, some investment, you know, litigation here, right? All high power things that we associate with money and, you know, and all this, right? Influence, power, dominance. If you walk into a court case and it's just women in the audience, you'll think, oh, it's probably a family court issue to do with babies and prenuptial agreements and like money for high heels and clothes and this sort of shit. Okay, and that will be literally everybody's assumption. You will not be shown a photograph of a courtroom filled with just, you know, a female audience and a female litigant and think, oh yeah, that must be about an integrated weapon system and a live running genocide. Okay, it just won't. It's like the impression is completely different. Okay, so in this society, there is this overwhelming importance of having a dick. And if you don't have one, to have one nearby, ideally many more nearby, okay? So then it leaves an impression. So this is a very, very serious point. And I am the last one to put you down, ladies, okay? As you can imagine, I'm very much in favor of women going out there and, you know, entering male fields like particle physics, which, by the way, in Eastern Europe isn't actually a male field as much as mathematics isn't a male field, but in Western Europe it is for historical reasons. Okay, so of course I'm in favor of promoting women. I was working in an all-female team for a year and a half for the first time in my life, right? Because my colleagues were mostly male in physics. So yeah, I'm completely in favor, but at the same time, when it's about war and weapon systems, it is just impossible to do it just with women, okay? And I think if you are talking to people whose main experience of war is to talk about it at dinner parties, you will arrive at maybe a different worldview, as opposed to if you just talk to actual, you know, generals and military personnel who've actually been to a real life war, right? These days, most armies have some women, right? But still, when it's about getting shit done and imposing dominance on the other side, they will go for big, hulking, muscular, very dominant men. Okay? Even though men and women carry the same automatic machine guns and can mow down an entire community just the same. Still, male dominance and this huge square chest frame that men have makes a difference for genetic and historic reasons. Okay, and anybody who ignores this is doomed to fail. Okay, and I remind everybody that this is not a Twitter war. Okay, this is not an outreach war. Outreach has its, you know, place, especially in the beginning when it's about informing the population. But at the end of the day, this is a live shooting war with the most sophisticated weapon systems and the most, you know, bio-enabled and bio-robotized soldiers ever to fight a covert, dirty war on this planet. And it's a global war. It is a world war. So given that the weapon system is the most deadly and most sophisticated we ever had on planet Earth, right? The methods that we use to fight them have to be stronger, harder, and more efficient, and not soft power. Okay, so I'm saying this not because I am dissing outreach campaigns and Twitter wars. No, they were absolutely essential to get us in a position to win this war, because they were ultimately about recruitment. Okay, and it's about recruiting civil society, because we need the entirety of civil society to win this war, right? But what I'm saying is, as we're progressing through this war, okay, there are different phases to every war, okay? And now we had absolutely years and years and years where people had to literally put everything they had into doing outreach and memes and getting every last person over social media to inform them that the reality that we believed was, you know, around us is not actually true. There's an other reality that is actually lethal and is about to kill us. And there's a certain time that it takes for every last person to understand this. Now, I am not at any point am I dissing the outreach campaigns, okay? Not at all. Not at all, because I was reliant on them to find out what was going on. Otherwise, I would have never even had a, you know, mathematical chance of figuring this out. So I am using the stuff that people, you know, passed on to me using Twitter and social media. And that is a solid foundation without which I would be screwed. So I totally honor that. But what I'm talking about now is looking forward over the next coming weeks and months and the coming year. But it's actually really starting next week, you know. And what I'm saying is that at this point, so we've done the outreach now, And the outreach was successful. It was astoundingly successful. Even my mom knows about everything now, okay? And my mom tried desperately to just, you know, block out all the horrific stuff because we had enough horror in our family life, you know, enough, and our family history. But still, she knows about everything now. She knows about the chemtrails, she knows about the chip implants, the directed energy weapons, about the pedophilia, like everything, right? And many other people's moms are the same, right? And I'm not dissing moms, but because of having to raise children and having a job, they are the most busy people out there. And, you know, when you reach them, you really have reached society. So that's done now, okay? So what I'm saying is, going forward, we can rely on literally everybody knowing. The only people I've seen left on social media who keep claiming, you know, using the CIA term conspiracy theory, or keep questioning and claiming this isn't true and everything that you say, well, they are all just the troll factories. That's how I can, you know, pick them up the first time. It's like, oh, there's another doubter. Oh, let's just look at his or her username, right? Does it have 666 in it, or 777? Is it a ludicrous, you know, number and letter combination? Usually it is. So that's a troll farm. Okay, so you have all these, like the black hat cyber warriors from GCHQ and NSA and other troll factories. But apart from them, in society, everybody knows. And those few completely brainwashed, you know, dunce heads who've just been binge watching mainstream news media, I think we can do without them. Okay, I don't think they really matter. But everybody who actually matters and who's looking out for their family and for their society, they all know. Okay, so now what's the next phase? And this is where the overwhelming importance of having a dick will become even more important. Okay, it's starting now, and, you know, will not stop till we finish this war, and will become ever more important. Now, the thing is the following. We had this war, like, okay, so in the beginning, people, top researchers and very brilliant people, cottoned on to what was going on. So they did the research. A lot of them were killed, you know, early on, but they managed to write books. They managed to pass on their knowledge. Then other researchers picked up on it. And, you know, there was this entire wave where people figured out, like new people who were waking up, were figuring out faster and faster what was going on, basing their insight on everything that has gone before. Okay, so then these people started doing systematic outreach and so on. But as the stuff was going on, the other side has been expanding and building up this integrated weapon system, which is a directed energy weapon system that's interfacing with the non-consensual implants that we all, pretty much all, have in our bodies now. Okay, so while this entire phase was necessary, right, at some point, we have to tackle the actual warfare equipment. Okay. Now, in the beginning, had people switched over too early, the numbers would have been too little and people would have been killed in large numbers. And then, you know, the resistance or the fight back against the criminality would have been extinguished. Now, there are so many people that with every death, you know, 10, 50, 100 people activate saying, this is enough now, right? When they murdered Seth Rich, so many people got activated and said, well, this far, no further. And Gareth Williams in the UK, actually that activated me when I thought it's that far and no further, right? And so on and so on. So with every murder, the numbers will just explode exponentially. So we have finished the outreach phase and we're now on a solid foundation. We'll continue doing outreach. I will continue tweeting about this, but now we need to do something else. And this something else will require men much more than before. So when you have an outreach campaign over social media, women can hide behind anonymous tags and appear like men. And I actually found personally that when I tweeted something appearing like a man, it had much more resonance. Okay, this is not always true, but on average, it's true. If information is presented by men, people are much more likely to accept it. Okay, so in this outreach phase using social media, women could spoof it and could come across like men and could have the same effectiveness. But in real life now, the effectiveness of women is going to decrease. Okay, and that is just a fact of life. Okay, so the point is, how do you use the women fighters we have, like myself included, and maximize their impact, right? And what other jobs need to be done now, starting, you know, Monday morning? It's already Monday morning over here, and going forward towards Christmas and, you know, New Year and in the next year. What are the coming jobs, okay, that we really need to like tackle now? What I would say is, as I explained, I'm launching court cases. Okay, now if I go in as a woman by myself, even if I have on paper people support me, I will not be taken seriously. I literally need phalluses in the room, honestly, right? And if these people could come into the room with all the dominance, you know, signifies dominance displays that, you know, people typically use, for example, a dark suit, a black suit, looking business, looking like power, looking like money, then the chances of being serious, being taken seriously will just increase, you know? Now, I'm not saying I need a room completely populated by men, right? Because that, again, would also be weird. I actually think that the judge would assume that all of those people in the background are actually all working for MI6, right? Because it's a, you know, that would literally be the assumption. But I need a good mix of supporters with a lot of men, okay? Because it also signals to the judiciary and the judge that, yes, the men in society care, right? And they would be the ones to go, you know, at loggerheads with the government eventually if it ever came to civil war. So that is the first signaler for the establishment to take something seriously, okay? Now, there's another reason why in today's society, it's incredibly important to have a dick, and that is for historic reasons. I will show you. Let me share my screen. Now, this is why I'm often saying that this concept that there's this glass ceiling that somehow some women manage to break and others do not, it's completely wrong. It's not a glass ceiling, and no single woman ever really broke through it, okay? And what I mean is the following, okay? It's incorporated in this image here. This, ladies and gentlemen, are all the Masonic lodges in Texas, okay? Basically, I think the big gaps that you can see here and here, I think that's desert as far as I can make out. I don't think there's much going on in these areas, but everywhere where there are towns, there are Masonic lodges. Now, the entire point of the Masons was to organize all the men in society into a hierarchy and subjugate them, you know, under individual men. But the purpose was to create a big pyramid. And once you are recruiting somebody into this Masonic structure, the natural setup of society is altered. The natural setup, which is how the Constitution and every government and every society in the world is officially set up, is that you turn 18 or 21, but once you're, you know, come of age and you're full age, you have all the rights of everybody else. You can, in principle, run for president. You can, you know, choose whatever job you want to do. You can earn your money. You have access to become a senator and so on, in principle, okay? So the normal setup of society is a flat hierarchy at first. There's a huge base and it's equal. Now, with the Masonic lodges, that flat hierarchy is completely changed. It becomes pyramids, okay? Individual pyramids within these individual Masonic lodges, and then you have these individual pyramids and hierarchies interfacing into one big pyramid. So if you like, all the 33-degree Masons are again part of a bigger structure, and then they have to have their, you know, cock hierarchy within that by some means, and blah, blah, blah. But the most important thing is to change the equal flat hierarchy of society into a pyramid organization that can be centrally controlled by just very few people. Okay. Now, the Masons have been around since times immemorial. And as you know, I always say they are the front of the Vatican Secret Service and military intelligence system, which is the Jesuits. Okay. So wherever there was ever a church anywhere on planet Earth, there were church taxes, and there was a money stream that had to be protected. And there was typically stuff in the churches that was valuable that also needed to be protected. So historically, wherever there was a church, there was a little church secret service around it, even though most people didn't know. Now, this grew into a worldwide system of surveillance and secret services. Okay, and this existed ever since, you know, churches have started spreading across the world. Now, in more modern times, that was formalized into the Jesuits. They had even their own assassin system, right? So the Vatican assassins, the Jesuits, are famous. There's a big fat book written about them, you know, volume 1 of all the Jesuit murders. But that is actually the societal structure that our modern intelligence agencies are based on. But there's a civil side to this, and that's the Masons. They are the front of the Jesuits. They are a civil society front for the spying network. Okay. And by the way, what we know as this targeting program is originally what's called the white glove treatment in Masonry, right? White gloves because the ceremonial gloves in Masonry are white. But the white glove treatment is basically targeting. It is this society of covert Masons turning on a person, ensuring that this person can't get a job, can't get an income, all his business endeavors are destroyed. So the only people who succeed are the ones who let themselves be organized into this pyramid hierarchy. That's the entire point. Okay, now this thing here is this was Texas, and you think, okay, you know, one plot. By the way, I didn't make this plot. This was a Masonic lodge in Texas mapping all the other lodges. Why? It's, as one Mason once explained it to me, if you're a Mason, you can go to any other lodge, you can even get free accommodation. So imagine how much money you save, you know, on your business travels. And all the other Masons there have to support you. That's the deal. So you have a little nepotist network wherever you go. So your business is going to boom and everybody else will have a much harder time. Okay. So for the Masons, it's important to know where all the other Masonic lodges are and where all the other Masons are. Okay. So that is a huge boost to your income potential and so on. Right. But then there's also another, if you think this is just Texas, let me just share the screen and show you another one. This is just the ones I managed to find numbers on very quickly online. This thing here is Ohio. Okay. These are the, this is Indiana. I think this is Indiana. Sorry, my geography is so shit. I was really lazy at the time when we had to learn all American geography off by heart. I just couldn't be fucked. Anyway, so it's another US state somewhere here between Chicago and Cincinnati. Okay, and it's filled with Masonic lodges. That's my point. Okay, so we now have these two US states, and I can tell you that not just every other US state is exactly the same as these two, but also the entire world is the same, okay? And while the Masons are the civil society front, they are also integrated into this Vatican architecture of the Jesuits, which have similar but slightly different symbology. If you want to, map the, hang on, where I've made a plot recently. If you want to map the distribution of the original, like the underlying Vatican architecture, hang on, I have just made, here it is. Okay, so this is a little plot that I made. Okay, this is now the symbolism of the actual Vatican crime cartel. And the Masons are, so the Jesuits are the military intelligence, if you like, the law enforcement. And then the Masons are the civil society front, you know, of the spying network. But if you want to map the Vatican architecture, here is now the, you can map it by these obelisks. Okay, let me just, how do I make it a bit bigger? Like this, maybe. I hope you can see it. Now here I've just drawn all the different obelisks that you can find in prominent places in cities around the world. So this is the original one in the Vatican. So the Vatican, London, and Washington, the big phallus in Washington, that's the three city state, the original triumvirate from which the rest has grown, okay, around the world. But as you can see, there's one in Paris and Rome and Moscow, St. Petersburg, Istanbul, Brussels, Dublin, Berlin, Washington, New York, Houston, Fairview. Yeah, I included Fairview, which is a tiny place, but I wanted to say you have a massive, massive Masonic cock, even in the back of Beyond, okay? So, you know, Fairview seems like there's nothing going on, but maybe there's more going on than one realizes. Maybe they're underground bunkers. Maybe there's some sort of network. Either way, they've got a very impressive Masonic phallus, you know, competing with the one in New York. Now, there's one in Sao Paulo, Rio, Toronto, Buenos Aires, Caracas, Montevideo, Sydney, Auckland, Taiwan, Singapore, Delhi, Manila, Bloemfontein, wherever that is in South Africa, Bangkok, Santo Domingo, and even Beijing. Okay, it's all the same structure. It's all the same. So there's some network, secret service network, that is global, and it doesn't matter if it's, you know, the West or the East, like Moscow and St. Petersburg, and it doesn't matter what religion you have, right? Here's Istanbul, and you know, where's the one in the Philippines? But wherever you are in the world, this structure exists. Now, this structure, as that big stone cock already, you know, foretells, is an all-male club. The Vatican and the Jesuits are all male, right? Similarly, the Masons in Texas and in Indiana are all male clubs. There are no women. And then people say, oh, yes, but there's also the Eastern Star. Oh, give me a break. The Eastern Star is pissing nothing. As far as I'm aware, the Eastern Star is grooming women, showing them how to walk in high heels and how to, you know, make their boobs look bigger, and then, you know, sells them to the media companies as weather girls. That's the Eastern Star. They're little fluffy things, and I'm sure some of them, you know, killed kids to try to make it in the male world. But I'm telling you, ladies, give the fuck up, because you'll never, ever compete with this, you know, closely knit brotherhood of the Masons that's all over Texas and all over the world, right? And whose main symbol of worship is the cock, right? So again, in the secret society world, which is the actual hardware architecture around the globe, it's all male, and having a dick is of overwhelming importance. Now, with this huge network in place, let's talk about the glass ceiling. If you are one woman trying to make it maybe in a bigger company, that already implies it's owned by the Crown Corporation. If it's a big multinational company, they will own it, right? And you think that there's a glass ceiling? No, there's an entire spider's web. There are spiders' cobwebs all around you that are invisible, that are actually holding you down. And that is this huge international all-male networks where women do not have any access, right? So as much as if you're a man and you are not part of the Masons, I can tell you that your business will not flourish as much as if you were in the Masons, which is, by the way, you know, exactly why many people decided in business and especially in politics to just join the Masons and just think, oh yeah, what the hell, right? If that's what I need to do to get ahead, I'll just do that. But as a woman, you can't even do that, right? And sorry, this Eastern Star is really just about sex trafficking you. It's not about giving you the same opportunities as this like worldwide network of, dick lovers. So, there is no glass ceiling. It's this huge network around you. It's an entire parallel society that's holding you down. And no one ever managed to smash through that parallel society because they can't on their own. Now, I'm not saying that this parallel society can't be smashed, and I'm actually all for it, right? I'm really all for smashing up this shit that's, that is killing us all. But you have to do it differently. Instead of just, talking about the glass ceiling and in trying to litigate for the 30% or 10% of less pay that you get as a woman, you have to literally bust up all these Masonic lodges and ask how it can be that in our society and worldwide, we have this massive parallel society, a super establishment that women don't have any access to. In other words, the discrimination of the Masons against women needs to be challenged in court, right? I actually think the Masons should be abolished because they're a transnational criminal organization. But, before that, what should have happened a long time ago is for women to actually litigate about that and say, why can't I become, 33-degree Mason with the men, not in my Eastern Star pissing, lipstick club. That's what this is about. You have to go where the power is, where the network is, and you have to bust that open if you ever want to, sit at the same table with these people. So let's keep in mind that we have, as I just said in the beginning, we have genetic differences that make men not take women seriously at all, not at all, or certainly the cleverer ones still not quite the same as if they were talking to a man, right? Second of all, for historic reasons, and because also for genetic reasons, men gang together and hunt in packs. This ganging together and hunting in packs leads to this international networking of all male societies, right? So we have all these different effects in our society. And when you combine that by going into a Masonic court as a woman by yourself, unless you have a huge male non-Masonic presence, such that all the Masons crap themselves and think, okay, let's pedal backwards because we're about to lose a lot more than, what's actually worth to be gained from this litigation. Unless you can show that dominance display, we will lose this court case, and I will lose this court case, but you will lose too, right? So that's what I mean. And this is what I tried to explain over Twitter just yesterday and the day before. It didn't go down well at all. I was called a feminazi and whatnot, right? And somebody said I'm obsessed by gender. No. I'm not obsessed by gender, right? Men are. Men are. A huge difference. But unless I recognize and flag and factor in the obsession of men with sex and gender, right, I'm going to lose this war, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I think. The only thing that matters is what the other side thinks and how they operate in a war. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. So I can tell you from my personal experience, right, it is absolutely overwhelmingly important to have a dick. I can point to genetic, and historical facts that pretty much, support what I'm saying. And I can point to these super secret societies, these super structures in our world that are actually bigger than any one national secret service. I mean, in a sense, the secret services are fused with the Masons and are one and the same entity, okay? But if you just take the administrative entity of a secret service with a few thousand individuals, the Masons are the biggest army on planet Earth, right? They are the biggest all-male army on planet Earth. So if you want to achieve anything, you better take it on with that army, right? Do you understand, guys? So on top of all this, right, which is just about, mental differences between men and women and how they perceive each other, the societal differences, okay? There's also genetic differences that are freaking obvious, right? This is why you have pretty much 99.9% of all house moving companies being all male, right? It's because men just have more muscle mass than women naturally, okay? I have seen guys who had like upper arms that was so big that if my upper thighs were that size, I would be like, oh my God, it's time to lose weight, right? And that was just his arm, right? I can't develop muscle like that, but many men can. And a man without even trying or being particularly sporty will just have more muscle mass than me. So if there's any sort of heavy lifting involved at some point in this war, which I can tell you there will be, we need the men to get shit done. And they have to be ready to do so. And they can't just be like, oh yeah, but look, I'm already full-time tweeting, and look at my well-trained tweeting thumbs, you know? That's not good enough. And we have this entire society that is, number one, pumped artificially, by the way, estrogen into the drinking water and other, you know, female hormones and mixes mimicking female hormones to turn men basically into women, right? And that's why the entire culture is now brimming completely full with, you know, effeminate homosexuals. I'm not saying there's anything wrong per se. Everybody can be the way they want to be. But when the media starts, you know, blowing one aspect of our society up out of proportions to how many effeminate homosexuals you'll meet in normal life, that's an agenda. And you have to ask, where does the agenda come from? Right? And as much as I'm saying there's nothing wrong with, you know, women, there's nothing wrong with effeminate homosexuals, right? But if the media suddenly starts to have an agenda of turning the average man more effeminate, and it's combined with bio and chemical weapons pumped into the drinking water, you have to say, hang on a second, what is the agenda here? And the agenda here is to make men just more like effeminate and less effective. That's it. Okay, why? Because the other side, this crime cartel, knows that men's biggest strength is their muscle mass. It's impressive. Okay, so when you are, you know, presenting yourself and you have a big, you know, chest frame and you're wearing a suit, it's going to be very impressive. You know, a lot of CEOs are actually pre-selected to be bigger, taller, have a big, impressive frame, just because you can push through business deals much better if you look like a silverback gorilla. It is just more dominant, okay? Women will never, ever be able to actually do that and emulate that, you know? So at some point in this war, we have to somehow convince all these, you know, men, especially the ones who stayed masculine by some miracle, despite the best attempts of our secret services, at some point they have to join this battle. And I can't do this, right? I can't do the jobs that they would have to do. I can't enter a room and have a hugely impressive gorilla-sized chest frame, right? I just can't. So the question is, when will these guys actually join us? Because they have to join us by yesterday. They have to understand what's going on. They have to be on the ball, and they have to be fully aware that, yes, we need them. And yeah, they have to be male dominant because we need to win this war. Okay? And what I see right now, I don't know about the experience of other people, but I personally, as an activist, I did not manage to work with any men. And that is despite the fact that I worked with men all my freaking life. Okay? I don't have a problem working with men. I love the male approach to working. I find it very efficient. I find it very no bullshit. That's exactly what I did in particle physics. Yet here in this activist field and in this war, the only people who were, you know, willing to step up to the plate were women. So that's a problem, right? Because moving forward, we need to interface men and women together, right? I mean, in a sense, when we want to shut this down, right, women can take over the tweeting and the outreach, right, because women's nature is to talk, it is to communicate, much more so than men, and even that's proven. But when it's about actually physically getting stuff done, we need the men, and we need them in much larger numbers. So my question to you guys is, how the hell are we gonna get the men going? What do we need to do to get the guys off their asses? And I can point to previous examples of the astounding success of having a lot of masculine men. Hang on, before I tell you this anecdote, I need to check if you can still hear me. So let me just do a quick cross check. Is this still running? Okay, yes. So to point you to an actual real life example of something really, hang on, let me check. I'm a bit paranoid if the audio drops off, but so far I didn't see any comments, so that should be fine. Okay, so I think it was the summer of 2012, if I remember correctly. I think it was summer of 2012. There were riots in London. So the summer of 2012 was very sunny and very warm. Hang on, London riots. Maybe I can bring it up. 2011, the week before that. Okay, so not 2012. So let me share my screen. This is kind of important, okay? From many points of view. So 2011, the England riots, okay? They were widely known as the London riots, and they were a series of riots between the 6th and 11th of August 2011, when thousands of people rioted in cities and towns across England. And it saw looting, arson, mass deployment of police, and resulted in the death of 5 people. In this looting, there was spectacular fires, so big, I remember shops and iconic houses were burned down. Every time iconic this or that burns down, I'm just reminded of the Masons burning down London, right, in 1666, the 666 having specific symbolic, importance to them. So I was like, let me guess, this property is going to be bought and it's going to be turned into, I don't know what, really expensive flats maybe. So I have to check what happened in the meantime. But these were the riots, okay? And it shows, here's a map of where the riots were. Oops, why did the symbols disappear in the background? Okay, you can see the symbols down there. So there were riots according to some north-south axis. And so this rioting was going on, okay? Now, the points to note about the rioting is that afterwards, there were interviews. I think I've seen 2 interviews, if I remember correctly, where certain looters and rioters were interviewed after they were caught and they were, charged with, whatever, the stealing a TV or something. And I remember one particularly where this guy said that he doesn't even know why he did that. He doesn't know. I think that he broke the shop window, or somebody else broke a shop window, and he made off with a TV or whatever. It's like, okay. I mean, these premises are all insured, okay? So it's bad, but it's not a catastrophe. I remember what was striking is that when I looked at his face and his micro expressions, that's like he's saying the truth. Right? This is not just fake news and one of these actors saying, oh, I don't know why I did that. Oh, it must be, society imposing something on me or some shit like that. No, this guy actually meant to say he has no idea why he did that. It wasn't in his nature as he knew himself. Now, years later, when I heard about neurotechnology, at some point I remembered this and I was like, what if he was neurotech? What if this entire London rioting was just large-scale neurotechnology experimentation that we know, thanks to whistleblowers, happening in places like Seattle? There's one whistleblower who said that the entire city of Seattle has now, covertly, these neurotechnology human experiments running across the entire city, right? And I thought, what if that was MI6's version? And yes, okay, you make it spectacular and you get people to loot and you do the typical Masonic hoo-ha, and then you can, you know, get more money for the police because you need this sort of stuff. But it's a very important point. So there has to be a lot more investigations about what exactly was the story behind the London riots. I didn't have time to look into it, but there's this huge aspect of it as well, which is relevant to our topic. Okay, so kicking off large-scale riots, just like Operation Crimson Mist. Now, let's see if I can bring that up quickly. Operation Crimson Mist. So Operation Crimson Mist was basically the induced mass murder, the genocide in Rwanda. But what has turned out is that here's the electronic slaughter in Rwanda, Operation Crimson Mist. Now, that was microwave emitters deployed over entire regions, making people extremely aggressive and extremely violent. And there were these planes flying overhead, and people started murdering each other, you know? And so there's this entire article about Operation Crimson Mist. This is not, you know, something that's made up. This article was from 2003, and the Rwandan genocide was in the mid-90s. Okay, so that is now 25 years ago. So something that was already used to induce genocide, right, can be deployed, you know, now, and it's probably much more refined. And by the way, the people who induced the genocides, they were never tried for war crimes. I mean, I personally think they have to be executed, and their private assets have to be, you know, frozen and dissolved to pay the victims' damages. By the way, also of all the military and the intelligence services, CIA, that was involved at the time, right? So Operation Crimson Mist is a fact, and you need to know about it. And it's also relevant when we're talking about things like the London riots. Was it now a, you know, smaller version, suitcase-sized version of microwave emitters, making these people violent and burning stuff down and rioting? Was it maybe, you know, a large-scale experimentation of the head implants that, you know, all of us have without knowing, and so on? Right, all this has to be taken into account. Either way, what I want to say about the London riots is my personal experience. And at the time of the London riots, I got in touch with an old colleague, and who is you know, was part of the Greek minority in London. And he had family there, exactly in the area where people were rioting, and he had friends and pretty much in the area. So when I met him, I said, you know, hi, I will just call him Jay. And I said, hi, Jay, you know, I mean, what's the story with the London riots? Is your family okay? Have they had any businesses burned down or something? And he said, the London riots were not a problem for the Greek community. I said, what do you mean we're not a problem for the Greek community? He said, okay, we were right in the area where these things happened. But what the Greek community did is all the men just got their baseball bats or crowbars, went down into the street, made basically like a, you know, a barrier. So the section of the street, because London is like a patchwork of different ethnicities and they cluster, and you just didn't get in and you didn't get out through that unless you were actually allowed through that. So no rioting, no arson. The bullshit could, you know, was left to continue outside this cordoned off area. But the Greek men ensured that their families and their businesses are protected by having a round-the-clock shift, and basically enforcing this by their male dominance, right? It wasn't the Greek women going down there and, you know, standing there in high heels and saying, no, you better, you know, don't come in, or I'll snap a picture of you and send an angry tweet, right? It was a man with crowbars, and was hugely successful, right? Everywhere else, you know, MI5 and the Masons were running riots and were burning shit down and doing what the Masons have been doing since 1666, but not there. So when this was over, everything in the community was intact, back to normal. everybody was happy, and the men did what the, nature designed them to do, which is to ward off danger. And it worked. And it wasn't that hard. Once you have 20, or 30 guys with crowbars saying, you ain't getting in here, that's convincing. You're like, okay, what if we burn down, something over there? Let's go there, right? So at some point, what I'm saying is, there was no violence. These men didn't go out and bash people's heads in with the crowbars, but they were ready to do so, right? And they just said, this far and no further. That's it. End of story, right? And it works. Now, when we're dealing with this criminality, I am so lacking this. And every time I raise this as a woman, as a Holocaust victim, I have these smart ass former veterans from the US military explain to me how I can shoot down satellites and how I can, I don't know what, blow up a 5G emitter. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's your job. My job is to go into court and get a court order saying that what you're doing is okay, because we are fighting for our life. But I'm not going to shoot down a satellite, even if I could, because that is just not in my nature, right? I'm a woman, for fuck's sake. Okay. So I'm not going to go out there. If, of course, right, if I am literally the last line of defense and there's no man to defend me, I'm going to take up that crowbar and I'm going to bash somebody's head in if they're trying to kill me. Sure. Right. But that shouldn't be the default setting for crying out loud. Right. So one of the things that I'm just absolutely shocked and amazed by is we have all these, especially in the US, because there you do have critical mass, but also my scorn just applies just the same to the Swiss or the German military or the British military. We have these, especially in America, just armies of veterans who are homeless, who have, voice to skull. They are being tortured. They are being driven to suicide. And not once does it occur to them, hang on, if we all band together, we're a fucking army. In fact, we are the US Army, right? Where are they? I tried to reach out to veterans today and say to them, look, I found implants. I'm 100% sure all of your veterans are implanted to the hilt. But by the way, I found them in normal Americans. And as far as I can tell, the vast majority of the American population is implanted. Did veterans today care? Fuck no. Did they publish anything? No, despite the fact that they have published about neurotechnology before, right? And I said to them, you guys need to start discussing this of what is legal in the US, not what the, corrupt CIA judges think. What do you, the American people, think? And then you're the military, and you need to enforce what the American people think. But there's so much work to be done in figuring out how you're going to get to a decision, how you're going to establish what's right and what's wrong, and how are you going to organize yourself to then go around and smash up 5G emitters lawfully, right? But this shit needs to be discussed by yesterday, right? And I just don't see it. Where are all the men? Where are all these military veterans? And another concrete example that really would have helped 3 years ago, and we would be in a completely different situation now, is the following. When I was talking to my former American colleagues like Karen Melton Stewart and Dr. Millicent Black, okay, both of them have perpetrators. I think Millicent's torturer lives 1.5 miles away from her, and Karen is being shot at by a guy who was former military or military intelligence, who is her next door neighbor and has a shed where he hid a directed energy weapon. Okay, and that's the situation. Karen fought for herself already when a guy 30 years younger than her was sent to assault her on her own property. So she basically beat this guy, so that he had to be taken to hospital, right? She beat him down with a flashlight herself, right? Well done, Karen. So she had to do a man's job because there were no men there to protect her. And she did, right? With whatever she could, she did the job. The guy was in hospital, right? And she's thankfully still alive. But now we have the situation that she did that. And even though it was on her property and she was assaulted by a guy 30 years younger, the corrupt Florida, I think it was in Tallahassee or Florida, the corrupt judiciary, whereby the police station had, I think the mother of the guy who assaulted her was working in the local police station, if I remember correctly. So you can imagine. But the judiciary then blamed Karen, right? Now, where are all the men in this story, right? There were no men there to protect Karen. There were no men there to actually go to a court case and actually really show a dominance display, right? Saying this ain't happening in Florida, right? We have our stand your ground laws. There were no men there. And the entire judiciary just turned this litigation into a joke and was basically laughing about Karen. The same, exactly the same has happened to me in my 2016 litigation, right? But now 3 years have passed that I've known Karen, right? And in these 3 years, she was being machine gunned nonstop from her next door neighbor. Now, with this already having physically fought off somebody because there was no man there to protect her, having to defend yourself in court and being assaulted by them, and now you're being assaulted by a covert stealth weapon that's at your neighbor's house. How are we going to solve the situation? Okay, now, when Karen actually confronted this guy, right? He, I think, hurriedly changed something in the shed, and I think he, I remember that she photographed the shed and he changed something. There was something that it was clear the neighbor knew that she knew and then changed it a bit. Nevertheless, he continues to assault her. But again, she had to fight all that by herself. Now, imagine the situation if it were reversed, as if, if it were normal society again, where everybody knows everybody in the community and everybody sticks together. You get one asshole who is paid by the CIA or the FBI and InfraGard to put a weapon of mass destruction into a shed and irradiate a highly decorated 28-year veteran of the NSA, right? He's a guy, she's a woman. In natural society, she should be able to tell her neighbors, her husband and her neighbors, and then the community should mobilize a bunch of guys to go to this guy, ring his doorbell, no violence required. But if he opens the door and there are 15 guys saying, we have heard that you've pointed a directed energy weapon at Karen Melton Stewart in your shed, and we would most kindly tell you to stop, like now or else. And you don't even have to say what else is, right? But when a guy is confronted with 15 guys like that, he will crack. I promise you, he will crack, right? But there were no 15 guys. So this dickhead continues to irradiate Karen to this day. Why? Because there were no phalluses to, enforce on him to stop. And Karen can't do it herself. Why? Because of the overwhelming importance of having a dick, right? She, like me, doesn't have one, so she can't do it. Okay? And the same applies for every single victim. Every single victim. It also applies, and this is where it really got wild, on Twitter, when people accused me like, oh, you're a feminist. It's like, how can I be a feminist when I am appealing to the traditional role of men protecting women, right? It sounds more like you want me, right, to be the woman who's raising children, but also has a degree in physics, is also running teams in physics, is also running an international, investigation into weapon systems and organized crime, is taking people to court like a lawyer, and then you want me to go around with a baseball bat intimidating guys, right? You basically want me to do everything. And then when I say, oh, could you do your bit? You're like, oh, that's so feminist. No, it's not. It would have been feminist if I had been like, beating down the door of some veteran meeting saying, guys, move aside because I want to recapture the USA from the cabal. That would be being a feminist, right? Equal rights and all that, right? So when I'm saying, look, I have lived equal rights now, I've done pretty much everything that a man can, but sorry, I just don't have the muscle mass and the imposing chest frame, right, to intimidate any neighbors. And I don't mean intimidate in the bad way. I mean intimidate criminals to stop being criminals and murder neighbors. I just can't do it. And Karen can't do it. Okay? So what I see now is not a failure of women. I see an overwhelming, astounding failure of men to do their fucking job, which funnily enough, traditionally isn't that surprising. Sorry, that was a feminist dig, but it's actually true, right? I mean, all my life, my grandmother, my mother, my aunts, they're just like kicking, some guy, to get going and do his job while doing everything and remembering everybody's birthdays, right? So at some point I'm saying, King Kong needs to get up, off the sofa and do something. And I'm not talking about the victims, the male victims who are being, tortured here. And I'm talking about all the guys who have a duty in society to get shit done because only they can. So we need to mobilize them, right? And I'm sorry, mobilizing men is not my job either. It's the job of military leaders, of military veterans who have their heads screwed on. Again, for the same reason. If, some retired colonel, comes along and says, oi, son, get the fuck up off your ass. We're doing this now. He will get up off his ass. If I come along and say, excuse me, the world is on fire, on fire. Could you please go and extinguish, some fires? The guy's just gonna go on, right? So again, we're back to the overwhelming importance of having a dick, okay? So the people who need to get going, by definition, need to have a dick because only they can get the shit done that needs to be done now. And the people appealing to them to get going also have to have a dick, right? So this now, gentlemen, is an entirely male problem, and you need to get this job done ASAP, ideally by yesterday. And I would love to hear some input of how exactly you're going to do that. My plan is that I'm going into court and I'm saying to the court, look, there are distributed weapons of mass destruction hidden in sheds, hidden in trees, and camouflaged as telecommunication devices known as 5G. But they are not telecommunication devices. They are pulsed microwave weapons used for this genocide. They can snipe out birds in mid-flight, right? They can snipe out birds out of the tree, as they've done several times, live demonstrations with these 5G systems. So I'm going to go into court and I say, we have all these hidden weapon systems. I, as a woman, need protection because these people are killing me. And I am asking for protection, and I am asking for the court to protect me. And if the court can't enforce its own injunction against these weapon systems, I'm asking for permission for any man to smash these things up. Every 5G antenna you see, you should have the right to smash it the fuck up. Every directed energy weapon, you should have a right to smash it up. If you have a neighbor planting a weapon of mass destruction in his shed and the police refuses to raid this guy's house, the court refuses to impose an order, I actually think that the men in the community have a right to climb over the fence, raid his shed, and smash the fucking dude up. Right? I mean, you have a right to self-defense. It's just that women can't even enforce the right to self-defense in many cases. So this is genuinely my plan. I'm going in and I'm saying the court needs to clarify at what point are we allowed to use our right to self-defense, because we are being murdered by the police, by the FBI, by the US Air Force, and by the CIA. And the equivalent organizations here in Europe being the NDB, the BND, the Verfassungsschutz, MI5, and MI6, right? So at what point can we smash up objects? I'm not saying smashing people's heads in, right? Because typically you don't even need to do that. If this neighbor, this hypothetical neighbor, right, who was assaulting Karen, had suddenly 15 guys climb over his fence, right, and break into his shed, find the ewe and smash it up in his front garden, right? I mean, he could get a gun and try to aim at these people, right? Maybe out of those 15, you know, 5 guys could dissuade him from doing so. But I don't think he's going to resist much, right? Especially not if the 15 people climbing over the fence are former special forces, right? So this is what I'm talking about. I have been for 3 years begging for male support, okay? And I have been begging because I know very well how I'm not taken seriously. I was taken seriously in physics because men in physics are, a lot of them are autistic and all of them are lovely. I don't think I would have much of a, you know, macho problem in maths, but everywhere else in the world where people are not quite so cerebral, right? It's a real problem. And you need a dick to get shit done. For 3 years, no help. Now I'm going to court and I'm telling you, I need phalluses in the room, right? So if you happen to have one, please make it to my court hearing, right? I will tell you the date. Okay, I have to still, you know, get the date and all that. But be prepared that I need you literally just because of your dick, you know? I mean, as, I don't know, yes, charming as that might be, you know, there's this woman who just wants you because of your phallus. But seriously, right? And because of your impressive chest frame, it's not a joke. It's literally not a joke. And there's so much more behind this. And now just aside, right? And all this, I'm not putting men down, even though I do make snide jokes, but being a guy, you can deal with that, right? Being a real guy. Now, there is so much more behind it, okay? Because men and women we just are built different. We have genetic differences and it's okay, all right? It becomes a problem when we're trying to force something that's not natural to us, right? And there's many things that you can learn to do, right? I mean, women can become soldiers and men can, you know, take care of children just the same if we just put our mind to it. But overall, there's some things that just come naturally to us and not to the other sex, okay? For genetic reasons, on average. And we can either fight that, ignore that, deny it, try to cover it up, or, you know, say it's weird, or we could just embrace it and say, okay, this is the tools we have to work with. You don't really want a screwdriver to turn into a hammer and vice versa because you need them both. But when it's a nail, don't use a screwdriver, right? So we have all these problems in society. And what I'm trying to advocate is for us to interlock and interface and approach this problem as society as a whole, okay? Men being men and women being women and children being children, but we all have to be just one, right? Approaching this as an interlocking wall, you know, fighting the same criminality. And I'm telling you, I can't get this done with just a team of women. I just can't. So I need this. I need the male frame. I need male dominance, the male approach. I needed that when you guys turn up in the room, you know, the lawyers of MI6 are not going to check out your chest, right, or your bottom, but will look you straight in the eye thinking, oh shit, there's a lot of people caring about this topic. Let's not pull bullshit like last time, you know, and I really need this. So as soon as women have the support of men and vice versa, we can achieve anything. But if it becomes something unnatural that doesn't really exist in society, right, there will be problems and failure. Okay. So this so much about this topic. I hope I really brought it home to you, and understand that I don't hate men. In fact, I want more men on my team. I want to work with them more. You know, really, in the ideal world, already 3 years ago, I would have from the get-go had a mixed team. We would have approached politicians and everybody as men and women together and gotten a lot more done, and would have been taken a lot more seriously. Now, at this point in this war, we absolutely need men in large numbers, because yes, we are at the point where we need equipment smashed up. Weapons of mass destruction have to be disabled, and they have to be smashed up with a baseball bat or a crowbar. I'm serious, okay? And we have to find a way in society to smash up these things as gracefully as possible. And the people who do the smashing up need to be protected by women, right? Who then, if anybody tries to sue the guy, say, no, we requested this thing to be smashed up because us and our children need to survive. And we can't survive with these fucking weapons of mass destruction. Okay? So that's what we need to do. There is a role for both people. And it's as much as it's not possible for me to just go into court by myself, I'll be fucked. It's also not a good idea to just have men run around in gangs without the support of women who back them up and say, no, we actually wanted this equipment smashed up for the health of our children. If both work together, and while the men smash stuff up, the women get injunctions in court saying this stuff needs to be taken down and we've smashed up the equipment and we want damages on top of it, that's when it works. Okay, so that's what I really want. And I don't understand how in the US, because you do have critical mass, you still didn't manage to organize gangs of men and women to go around all these neighbors who have weapons, right, and knock at their doors in gangs of 20 or 30 saying what the fuck's going on because the victim next door is complaining about directed energy weapon attacks. Imagine that. Imagine we would have spent the last 3 years, right? Okay, it takes a bit of investment, right? But we can get it done, right? And we spend every weekend, instead of just, you know, I don't know what you do, you know, on your weekends, go shopping in Walmart, right? You just do a local trip to some victim with a group of other people who know what's going on. And the victim says, well, you know, this neighbor needs talking to and that guy. And then, you know, just in a group, people politely knock at the door. I'm not saying do anything violent, because you will not need to. Right? That's what we need. But for that, you have to move something in the physical world. Okay? Now, what I see a lot on the internet and on social media, and I personally consider it, at first I thought it was benign. And the more I see what accounts are behind it, the more I think it's actually disinformation. It's this thing of saying, oh yeah, but Jesus is going to save us all. Or, oh, God will win in the end. Well, look back at the religious wars where both sides were really believing in God, and God didn't really save any of them. Right? They both slaughtered each other in large numbers. Right? So that theory doesn't hold up. Now, the other thing is, oh, well, we can just solve these problems by raising our frequency. If I hear this fucking sentence again, I'm just going to scream, okay? What you're saying, if you're saying stuff like that, is gibberish, okay? Frequency, ladies and gentlemen, is defined as the oscillations per second of a wave. That's the units of frequency, hertz. It is beats or cycles per second. Now tell me, I'm sitting here, right, as a heap of biomass. What the fuck's my frequency? I'm not oscillating. I'm not going anywhere. When you look more closely, electrons in my, atoms that make up my body are oscillating, but at all sorts of frequencies, right? Molecules are oscillating. My vocal cords are oscillating. There's a lot of oscillation going on, but there's not one frequency. Okay, now you can superimpose frequencies to a certain degree upon each other, right? I mean, for waves, they have to be coherent, but blah, blah, blah. Long story short, yes, you can superimpose waves on each other, but then the overall structure is exactly the same as if you have many, many people talking at the same time over each other. You get noise. So you get a random noise wave. Yeah. So that's frequency. Now, if people on the internet say you just have to raise your frequency, hey, what the fuck? How? I can tell you physically how you can raise your frequency, because frequency is directly linked to energy on the individual wave length. Okay, so a fast oscillating wave has more energy than a slow wave. That's true. But if you really want to physically raise your frequency, you just have to dunk your index finger into a mug of coffee and you have raised the temperature of your finger, and ergo its frequency, I suppose, or the many frequencies in the molecules in your finger, right? So dunking your finger in coffee is raising your frequency, if you like. Dunking your finger in coffee ain't gonna stop criminality. So raising your frequency to solve any sort of problem is new age CIA neurolinguistic programming gobbledygook. Okay, that's just how it is. So please stop talking about raising your frequency or appealing to God or Jesus Christ. What you need to do is you need to move stuff in the physical world. You either need to move your ass physically in front of a politician to be in his face. That's going to have an effect. Or you need to move yourselves in groups in the face of a neighbor saying you need to shut down the directed energy weapons. Or else what you can also do is collectively buy shares for, sometimes you can get one for just $10, which entitles you to go to the board meetings of companies and then as a group go there and raise all hell about what these companies are doing. For example, Twitter, YouTube, Microsoft, right? Just recently somebody said, actually I probably have it here, Microsoft is teaming up with, this is something that somebody just sent around on Twitter today. Okay, here it is. Look at this. Okay. Big Pharma and Microsoft are teaming up in something called the ID 2020 Alliance that will combine vaccinations with implantable microchips to create your digital ID. This was released or published on the 24th of October, 2019. And here's ID, oops, sorry. That's ID 2025, sorry, just flicked to another image. Now, in this, what are you gonna do? What are you going to do? You have to physically be in these people's faces and say no. You can go there as a gang to these meetings. You can go to the conference and say, this is crimes against humanity. We're just going to sue you all, right? Or you can go into court, right, and physically demand an injunction against that, saying this is a crime against humanity. But you need to physically do something. Neither meditation, nor raising your frequency, nor prayer is going to achieve anything. You need to physically do stuff. And now you all have to start thinking about, how are you going to physically do stuff, please? Okay, very important. Now, another piece of news. Okay, this is really shocking. Okay, this is now actually freaking annoying. Here, So this is the news that, with little fanfare, William Barr formally announces an Orwellian pre-crime program. A recent memorandum authored by Attorney General William Barr announced a new pre-crime program inspired by war on terror tactics and is set to be implemented next year. So that's 2020. Okay. Now, the one thing that you need to know about this is that this guy's daddy was a CIA operative. In other words, this guy's father was a crown agent. In other words, this guy's father was a member of a global mafia. This guy's father was the member of a criminal organization. He was a criminal. So I've been saying this for a long time. If your daddy is in the CIA, you have to work really hard to get out, because the system is set up that the children get incorporated into the Crown Corporation. Okay. Now, here is the memorandum. Okay, you can download it here and you can read about all this, but just remember that pre-crime means that they will arrest people or sabotage people before they committed any crime. So last Wednesday, U.S. Attorney General William Barr issued a memorandum to all U.S. attorneys, law enforcement agencies, and top-ranking Justice Department officials, announcing the imminent implementation of new National Disruption and Early Engagement Program. Now, engagement is a term from the military, typically referring to gunning people to shits. Okay? Aimed at detecting potential mass shooters before they commit any crime. Now, this is fucking interesting because every single mass shooter so far was part of a FEMA drill and was a, CIA, FBI operative, right? I mean, so far they could detect every mass shooter ahead of time by just asking the FBI, who are you launching next week as a mass shooter? And saying that program is canceled, right? So this is bollocks. And it's especially bollocks because the entire US law enforcement agencies can't even arrest criminals post-crime. We have people whose faces and entire torsos are burned to a crisp with directed energy weapons, and law enforcement can't even arrest anybody after the fact, even when you know which neighbor it is. So I have to say that law enforcement hasn't existed in the US for the last couple of decades for sure. Maybe it never existed, but I, for one, have never ever in my life seen a criminal investigation actually be conducted. Not once. I've heard about them in movies and in TV shows that there are police investigations, but in real life, I have never seen any evidence of ever a police investigation ever having taken place. Not in the crimes reported by me and my family, not about the crimes reported by, relatives and more distant friends, and most certainly not in this field of targeting. I have never, ever seen a single police investigation anywhere in the entire North American continent, in Europe or in Australia. Never. As far as I'm concerned, the police are just human traffickers, right? And the police station is your local human trafficking office. But, I've seen lots of evidence of police being involved in human trafficking, but not a single, and this is like an astounding statement, okay? On 3 continents, and I have never seen any evidence ever of any meaningful investigations. I know that if you park somewhere wrong, they can look up your address and send you the bill. They do, they are involved in financial racketeering of that type, but criminal investigations or murder investigations, where did it take place? Right? Like Gareth Williams was murdered, it's obvious who murdered him, no police investigation. Dr. Ronnie Kilder was murdered, no police investigation. Dareen Daoud was murdered, and it's obvious who did it, MI5, no police investigation, right? And I can go on. So I don't know what the police does. So post-crime, they do jack shit. So why do they need pre-crime? Will they do jack shit pre-crime? They will know ahead of time who the mass shooter is and then do nothing, right? No. Suddenly pre-crime, they will do stuff, even though post-crime, they can't do jack. So what's the story? And given that all the mass shooters were they themselves, right? And people they hired as actors and people they put there as Manchurian candidates, what's the story? What is this pre-crime, right? And I'll tell you what this pre-crime is based on everything that I've said before. Let's put all this together. We have Operation Crimson Mist, where you can use directed energy weapons and microwaves to create riots and genocide, right? We have what I just said, right? The entire population being implanted on on 3 continents, you know, probably more, but for 3 continents, I do have evidence. So now, when you put all this together, what you can do is you can set up entire neighborhoods, you can set up groups of people, make them aggressive with microwaves, you know, amplify this with the chip implants under their scalp, really drive them, and set them up to commit a crime that is entirely forced on them by this technology, and then arrest them and incarcerate them for life. In other words, the only thing that the Masonic crime cartel needs to do is, you know, trigger your chips, aim a microwave beam at your head, you'll do some crime. They will know that you're going to do it because they had identified you pre-crime, which actually is not really what they claim it is targeting. They would have picked you out of a database to be targeted for this. They would have activated your chips, logged into your chips, set you off, monitored you as you were doing it, then aimed a microwave beam at your head, waited for you to get either stupidly aggressive and beat your wife or maybe kill your wife. You know, they can do that too. They can even get you to kill your children, right? And then they would arrest you. You'll be the evil one and you'll be in jail. And all this, nothing would have happened without the fucking criminals from the police. And that is pre-crime. That is pre-crime. And I'm 100% sure that this is what they mean with pre-crime, because I know that they knew nothing post-crime, even when the victims have done the investigation and bring them the evidence. They do nothing. So arresting criminals is not the job of the police. I have never seen evidence of them arresting criminals ever. Okay. Now with A.G. Barr, already, as soon as I heard that his daddy's in the CIA, I thought, forget this guy. Forget him, right? But there's much, much more to A.G. Barr, okay? Now, the thing that is also to be noted about A.G. Barr is that, as you know, Jeffrey Epstein has been funneled out of jail, right? Let me share this screen. This is now an article here by Henry Makoff, or Mako. And it's about the Jeffrey Epstein case, okay? So, oh, wow, there seems to be a, you know, an image of Trump too. But anyway, right, this is now, in this article, what I actually wanted to point at, right, was this image here. So this is the prison warden, Shirley Skipper Scott. Funny name, isn't it? Shirley Skipper Scott, who basically was in charge of Epstein officially dying, unofficially being still alive and being funneled out of jail. And people found this photograph of her making the Illuminati hand sign, right? So my point is that Epstein has been obviously funneled out. He's obviously not dead. The prison warden is posing with the symbol of the Illuminati, the, you know, particularly criminal subset of the Masons, which are already a transnational criminal organization. And A.G. Barr here has not ordered any arrests. Okay, so combine that, right? Flashing the Illuminati hand sign and no arrests. Epstein funneled out, no arrests. Right, the judicial system or the judicial process of the United States has been obviously violated in the most jeering fashion, and the Attorney General doesn't arrest the criminals. Well, from that I conclude that the Attorney General is a criminal. he's a criminal and part of the network as much as his daddy was. It would make perfect sense. And then you hear him with this, memorandum about pre-crime, and at the same time being too fucking dumb to order arrests post-crime, right? And it follows that this guy is a big fat criminal, right? So the question now is, given that your attorney general is a big fat criminal, right, as it seems, what are you Americans going to do? And what should you have done all along? Now, the real problem with the AG Barr story is that if you 327 million Americans just trust one man to drain the swamp, be that the president or AG Barr, you're screwed. Because how cheap is it for the CIA just to buy, threaten, or intimidate one man? Now, if that one man's daddy just happens to be in the CIA, right? The CIA was there when this guy was born. The CIA was probably present at his birth, right? They were in the hospital because one CIA's, sperm was germinating into a person, into a little proto-CIA agent. Surely they would want to, get hold of the little baby CIA agent and make sure that it's groomed into the perfect CIA agent to maybe have like a, high-flying post like the Attorney General at the end of all this, right? So you all trusted AG Barr to get stuff done, and he did the opposite, right? Now, the lesson from this is you never, ever trust the government to pick somebody to sort out your problems. You do it yourself. How can you do it yourself? Well, throughout all this time, as soon as Epstein disappeared without being dead, right, you could have gone into court and said, well, we as the American people, we demand the arrest of all the prison staff. Did any of you do that? No. Why? Because you didn't care. You said, oh, yeah, it's Epstein. What does it have to do with me? It has everything to do with you. Because this guy was mass murdering American children, as it seemed, okay, in his funky island, probably also children from around the world. But there was human sacrifice, taking place there, as it was rumored, if you followed the Q posts and all that, right? So all these people behind the scenes were doing lots of research, right? And then your American judicial system, and that is the system for you to bring you justice, was obviously just flaunted and jeered at and subverted by a bunch of idiots. It is your right as an American to just say, well, we demand that by a court order, the immediate arrest of these people. Okay, and then also note a couple of curious coincidences in all this. Okay, so this is the abbreviated name of this person, but her full name is Warden Shirley Skipper Scott. Now, say this name really fast. Shirley Skipper Scott, right? To me, it very much sounds like, surely you can skip out of jail scot-free. And it just so happens that with this funky name, she's flashing the Illuminati symbol, and the Illuminati love, like the Masons, these word games. And it just so happens that Epstein just, quite surely skipped out of jail scot-free. Wow, what coincidence, right? With all these coincidences, as an American, you have a right to descend down on your attorney general and say, well, first of all, these people in prison need to be, the people in prison need to be in prison, but on the other side of the cell wall, right? And then what's going on with the attorney general? And why did it take the American people to demand the arrest of these criminals? And actually, you have to find a way to force your own administration to do what you want to do. And then once you've established this mechanism, you can do the same thing with all the other investigations. What's your standing in the matter? Well, the standing, you have as an American is that this gang around Epstein is stealing children from all across the country. And on this news, apparently the FBI has now released the entire archive on the finders. Okay, it's somewhere in my Twitter stream. So if you go through my Twitter stream on JIT Update, there's the, maybe I can find it very quickly if you have a bit of patience, because it is quite important. So if you have been following, if you have been following Ted Gunderson, he already reported about the finders a long time ago. Okay, so maybe you knew, but now the FBI has actually published, you know, some of their documents on the finders, and that is hugely hugely meaningful. It's like the first mini baby step towards recapturing, you know, the American society. Let's see, I have to click downwards for half an hour to get down to the finders probably. I should have bookmarked this for you. But anyway, so you do have standing, and you have to understand the main ingredients to a court case, right? First of all, you need to prove that you have something to say about it, that the court case is directly relevant to you, right? Maybe you have children, and maybe you want to protect those children and so on, right? There's also other ways that you can litigate where you are basically a concerned party and you are litigating in the public's interest. But for that, you all need to find out how your system actually works, and you need to cherish it. You need to take it seriously, and then you need to start acting on it, right? And it's your job. And again, we come back to the overwhelming importance of having a dick, right? And it means that whatever you're doing, you better make sure that there are lots and lots of men around and with you to support you. Okay, hang on. I think I've almost reached the bit about Ted Gunderson. Hang on. What is this thing? Okay, I have to show you another time. So anyway, if you are patient and go through my Twitter stream, you will find it. Okay, the finders and the FBI releasing. So I think it was even the FBI archive that tweeted out the finders, you know, their documents. Now, a lot of the documents in there, if I remember correctly, were actually by Ted Gunderson. So he did the investigation, all this, and he said how children were being stolen from the streets of the US on an industrial scale and sold into child abuse and being murdered by satanic ritual sacrifice. Back then, when Ted Gunderson said that, that was a huge thing. These days, everybody knows about satanic sacrifice, but you know, back then nobody did. And Ted Gunderson was, as his own doctor said, he was murdered. He was poisoned with arsenic over actually a very long period of time. So, oh yes, and another connection to A.G. Barr, by the way, is that Ted Gunderson notified A.G. Barr about this stuff. And it's not known if what A.G. Barr did with this. There was a letter from Ted Gunderson. Ted Gunderson was I think the special agent in charge of the Los Angeles FBI. And he wrote to A.G. Barr at the time about this. And the question is, what did A.G. Barr do since then? Right? Because it's a big deal, a very, very, very big deal. So what's going on, right? And there are these, again, you know, these random anonymous people over the internet saying, oh, yes, but Epstein is alive because he made a deal and behind the scenes he's helping the investigation and all that. Well, okay, but you still have subverted the judicial process of the American people, right? For this to have any sort of validity in society, you have to follow the process. If you subvert the process, what you set up is basically a backdoor through which everybody can from now on subvert the judicial process. You have, for this case, trashed the entire, you know, judicial, you know, sequence in which things have to happen. And they have to happen in that way so that the American people can be sure that the person you're interviewing is the person who's in jail, right? So these are very, very, very problematic problems. And what we really need to do as men and women in society is we need to work together, start brainstorming about what the hell to do, and then we have to move to action. And that action has to have a lot of men alongside us, on board, exactly the same, right? We have to be side by side, but the more men, the better when it comes to action. Whatever action, not just smashing up dues, also going into court for all the genetic and historic reasons I've just outlined. Okay. So anyway, I've talked again so much, and I am so desperate for help because I cannot write my court case because I'm in so much pain. I'm being pain tortured. My brain is being cooked as I'm trying to work. I have shielding here, whoops, which just fell down. I've got a huge metal shielding here. I've got shielding here, right? I am boxed in. I've moved the shielding a bit further out, but nevertheless, right, I'm surrounded by shielding, and I have to be able to survive. And I'm being machine gunned with military weaponry, and the entire, that's my radioactivity meter showing, 80 microsieverts per hour. Yeah, so I'm also being shot at with bursts of radioactivity that are always exactly around 80, 78, 81, 82, but 80, Curious, almost like somebody's x-raying my room here, So all this is going on, right? And so far, I don't actually have any male help, like physical help, okay? These weapons are very hard to track down and, smash up. But my colleague Karen doesn't have any male help, Dr. Millicent Black in Tennessee doesn't have any male help. And this is really bad because this is a male war with weapons, right? Yeah, sure, some women work for DARPA as well, and I'm sure for Lockheed Martin, but really, okay, these weapons were developed by men. They are mostly at the highest level being deployed and operated by men because it's warfare equipment. At the lower level, there are a lot of women gang stalkers and they can use the stuff too, but still, come on, right? This is a male warfare system, so women can't be expected to fight all this by themselves, okay? And that is the truth. We need men to help us. So you guys figure out, if you want to support me, if you want this court case to succeed, you have to think about how you're going to do that. And not just me, how you're going to help Karen, how you're going to help Millicent, how you're going to help all the other victims. I always pick Karen and Millicent because those are two victims who are publicly known and I can name them. There are many victims on Twitter, right, on social media who maybe live near you. How are you going to help them, right? And it is now incumbent on the men to think of something, And as I said, one thing you can do is gang together in big, impressive groups of men and go and question these people. You don't have to punch anybody. You don't have to take a baseball bat. You just have to physically turn up, right? And present yourself. So one idea, we should have started 3 years ago, but please, okay, I really need help. I need all the veterans, military veterans who have their heads screwed on to get going. Okay, I expected so much more from these military veterans, the thousands and thousands and thousands. I mean, you guys should mobilize already, just because I think, 28 of you commit suicide alone every day? I mean, why is that? It's probably because of targeting. So targeting affects you. You never know when it's going to hit you. If you are a former soldier, you will have been implanted head to toe, so they can set you off whenever they want to, according to, Operation Crimson Mist. This pre-crime program announced by AG Barr, I bet you that the first people they're going to pick up will probably be veterans. because they want to pick you off the street. They want to get rid of you because you know how to use a gun. You're trained, right? Now that you're not fighting the bankers' wars abroad for the Crown Corporation, they are scared that you will gang up on them. So what I'm saying is also, men, please don't just go around in gangs by yourself. Have the women back you up, and you two both go into court and make a claim for an injunction and make an actual case for why you need to do certain things. You can do both, right? But you need to start working, and you need to be ready, just like the Greeks in London. You need to be ready to stand somewhere with a crowbar and say this far and no further. Okay? And no woman can ever take that job from you, right? This is a glass ceiling that I don't think many of us want to smash, right? Nor can we smash it. So you're safe, but you need to take on those jobs because society needs you. And it is just a fake, new age, disinfo, debilitating lie to give you the impression that you can just coast through life in this century, especially right now, just tweeting, you know, drinking your latte macchiato, wearing flip-flops, and having your, you know, hair in a ponytail on the back of your head like a girl. No. If that's all you do, you literally have failed as a man, right? So please, okay, there's this amazing importance of having a dick. And if you have one, you're one of the lucky ones, you know, you're a lucky guy, use it in every, you know, meaning of the word, but please use it for fighting this criminality, you know? So anyway, I wanted to get this off my chest. I hope you guys all know I love you all. You know, I love you women. I love you men. I love you all. And I'm fighting for you both. And when you remember, in all this, it's not just about protecting female victims. It's also protecting male victims who are also being gunned and are helpless against their neighbors. But the important thing is that the people who need to do the protecting have to be predominantly men. Otherwise, it will not register. Okay. And I had to tell you this now. The time has come, guys, to get up off your asses. So we need you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And as I said, I'll keep you updated on my court case. I'm massively delayed because I'm crawling on my gums. I'm in a lot of pain. I can barely function throughout the day. I spend most of my time trying to recover from injuries or just, you know, cowering under a bunker, or being massively angry for having to cower under bunker and not really getting much done. But I'll do my best. Okay. So thank you very much for listening. All the best to you guys. And if we all work together, men and women equally, we can get this done. We really can get this done. It's not that big a deal, but we need to start working together. So bye for now, and talk to you soon.